Okay, hello there, and welcome everybody to another Hempology 101 lecture here at the University of Victoria. This is the second lecture of the year. This is the sixth year that we've done free non-credit lectures here, and we do have some troubles with the room, as you can obviously see. We're outside, and hopefully we will get that fixed and have the posters updated for everyone. But for those online, it's not a problem. In fact, all the old lectures are online if you want to watch. But yeah, there's 22 lectures. Next week, we are going to have a special guest come and speak at part of the lecture on politics. We expect to have Police Officer David Bratzer here. So I'm going to be plugging that throughout the day, and we have other guest speakers throughout the year. But today we're going to be talking about the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937, and history is one of my favorite subjects. I think it's important for people to appreciate and understand why this plant was made illegal in the first place, to see in many ways what we're up against. Knowing your enemy is critical in any war, and this is in fact a war on drugs. And so before we can get to 1937 though, I think it's more important to understand the hemp industry of the 1800s, because the Marijuana Tax Act was really meant to eliminate the hemp plant from the marketplace and all the industries that the hemp plant either was or could sustain. And so the 1800s was in many ways for hemp the height of the plant's production and use. And hemp was cultivated over a couple of thousand years. It used to be the very same plant as the cannabis plant. And there's actually 5 different kinds of cannabis. There's what we call ruderalis, which is like a dirt weed, and then there's what we call cannabis sativa, and then there's cannabis indica, which are strains people will use for medicinal or recreational purposes, and they have quite distinct properties and sizes. But there's actually 2 kinds of hemp plants as well. There's hemp seed plants, which were grown for the seed. And as I said last week, I really think that, historically speaking, the use of the seed was the reason that we so embraced the cannabis plant. And the seed plants look really much like sativas, big bushy plants, 8, 10 feet tall, and really nice big colas on them. And they produce a lot of seeds. I think up to 40% or 30% of the weight of the plant, when dried, can be in the seed itself. And they're quite distinctly different than the hemp plants that were being grown for fiber. The hemp plants being grown for fiber look much more like tall grass with a little bit of bush on the top. And they would grow generally 12 to 16 feet tall. And if you see old pictures of them, they really do look like these huge grass fields, and they're very thick, and you get a couple hundred potentially within a square meter, as opposed to the seed plants, which again, they'd want big bushy plants, and you'd have maybe a couple in a square meter. But the hemp fiber plants grew tall and thick, which is why they are such an incredible producer of biomass. And so the cannabis plant is not only a high producer, but the fiber itself is really tough. If you ever trim cannabis, you'll find at times there's these long stalks that are almost like strings that are really tough to break with your scissors when you're pulling it apart. And otherwise, the fiber on the cannabis plant is one of the strongest known to humankind, which is why one of the first uses we made was rope. And so the fiber, the stalk, I should say, is made out of 2 components. There's the outside fibrous part. Oh, I should stay in front of the camera. Oops. There's the outside fiber, and then on the inside of the plant, there's a cork. or sort of a herd, as it would called, but it's like a woody pith, like many plants, you know. And so the fiber, you would to get it, you would take the stalk traditionally, you know, back in the old days, we would have just like pulled it out of the ground and beaten it on a rock and pulled the root off. And then we would have wound it together and started to make rope. The earliest rope we likely made, at least in any kind of a mass scale, like 10,000 years ago, when we started to use agriculture on a mass level, so thousands of people could live in small areas, right? Like that was when we first started to really treat agriculture much like an industry. And the first plant that we grew, or one of the first, was certainly cannabis. And one of the main reasons, aside from the seed, was the fiber. Again, the rope that could be made with hemp is some of the strongest that we could possibly make. It's prolific, so you get a lot of it. And rope was really important in the early days when you're building shelters, and certainly for warfare as well. And if you look back at pictures of any of the ancient warships, there's some picture in Jack Hare's book, The Emperor Wears No Clothes, of the USS Constitution, a ship that had 60 tons of hemp on the boat. And a lot of that was rope, and even to this day, hemp rope is used around the world because it's so strong, it lasts for so long in seawater and the like, and it's much preferable to a lot of plastic ones that might last longer but aren't nearly as easy to work with. Internationally was because they had a source locally, which is quite different than other countries. It's not so well known that one of the main reasons Napoleon invaded Russia was to burn down the Russian hemp fields, because Russia was selling cheap hemp products to England, and in order to undermine the English Navy, Napoleon tried to undermine their source of hemp so that they couldn't have any sails or any rope for their ships. And so the first thing Napoleon did was try to burn down the hemp fields. And also, it's not so well known, the taxes that you heard about the American colonies being frustrated with, that it was one of the main reasons they revolted against England, were really taxes on the production of hemp. And the American colonies were really upset at the amount of hemp that they were having to basically give up to Europe in various ways, either by paying taxes, or it was just all being bought up, and they didn't have great production facilities early on here, and the hemp was being taken back to England where it was being produced. Anyway, it's interesting to know how many wars were actually fought over hemp before the war on drugs. But it's certainly the case where there's been many wars fought over different drugs. On a side note, Britain fought 2 wars with China to establish the opium trade. That's why Hong Kong was developed as a separate port, so the English could take heroin, essentially, opium from India. I shouldn't say heroin. They would take opium from India and then take it over to China and sell it real cheap for Chinese tea and silver, and then they bring the silver back to England. And the Chinese fought 2 wars trying to stop them from selling opium in China. So in the 1800s, there were wars fought over the trade of these various plants and their derivatives. Now, the hemp plant, though, was amazing because it touched on so many different products and so many different markets. I mentioned, canvas. Well, certainly, the competition to that is the cotton industry, and the cotton farmers in the 1800s were slowly losing power in various ways, economically and politically. And they really used, over time, more and more pesticides, more and more fertilizers in order to keep production rates up. And so one of the first industries that was upset about the hemp plant competing with them was the cotton farmers. But really what started the most recent war against the cannabis plant, it was the paper industries. And 2 things happened in 1916. Invention, or a process, was created that could turn the herds, that cork that I mentioned, into paper. Before 1916, the herds were pretty much a waste product. They would get thrown in the animal stables, or they would get burned or something to that effect, but they weren't being used on a regular basis. Well, suddenly that could be turned into paper, which was increasingly more valuable in the early 1900s. And secondly, the year after that, a decorticator was finally invented in the United States. Now, what the decorticator was this basically this big combine that could go into a hemp field, cut it down, basically shake it or crunch it up so that the fiber and the herds would be separated, and you would have this really nice, almost silk-like fiber come out on one end, and a bunch of herds that you could turn into paper come out the other. The process before was much more cumbersome. Because the fiber is so strong, it was really hard on any equipment that people tried to develop, and a lot of it was being done by hand. So as the 1800s progressed, cotton became cheaper as machinery for it improved, and the machinery just never became available for hemp until George Klitzkin invented the decorticator. So suddenly, between the use of the herds as paper and the improved efficiencies with the decorticator, some economists estimated that the cannabis plant for farmers within a 2-year period became potentially 100 times more valuable to grow because of its uses and the sale of something that was just being thrown out before. And so that caught a lot of people's attention. One of them, the Scripps newspaper company, sent a reporter to look in on this machine that had been invented and was working out in the fields. And George Klitzkin eventually sold the patent to these newspaper companies, being convinced that they saw the reality that hemp created, that they wouldn't have to cut down the big trees anymore, that farmers could be made rich, or at least be made more wealthier than they were, and that everyone would benefit from this decorticator. George saw this vision, and he died thinking that this machine was being made. Well, in fact, the opposite. After buying the patent, these paper companies colluded with a number of other multinationals. And it started actually with the Hearst newspaper company. William Hearst, in fact, invented the term marijuana. Nobody had heard of it before. But in publishing a newspaper, he could come up with terms, and suddenly, one day, this new marijuana drug from Mexico was appearing throughout the United States, and it was causing all sorts of havoc, I should say, in the inner cities with young men. It's so bizarre when you look at it now, the extremes, because on one hand, you would smoke cannabis and you would turn into a raving maniac. On the other hand, you would smoke cannabis and you would be having wild orgies with complete strangers from faraway nations. Just the complete opposites of emotion that this plant would somehow create. And because nobody had heard of marijuana before, they'd all heard of hashish. That went way back traditionally around the world. Everybody knew of hashish. Everybody knew of cannabis, cannabis indica. Like the Queen Victoria used cannabis for menstrual cramps in the 1800s. It was in almost every medicine cabinet. If you go back into the early 19th century, there's ointments made out of cannabis, and for that matter, there would be cocaine and opium and a lot of other things as well. But it was a very common product and very well known. Marijuana, though, that was new. And so the newspaper companies did a very good job of convincing the public that there was this new scary drug that they had to keep their children away from. Now, it wasn't just newspaper companies, though, that were behind this. The cotton farmers had two things that they wanted to deal with. They not only wanted to eliminate hemp from the production of fiber or fabrics, which they almost did, except linen is actually hemp. It's made in many places around the world. They can't sell it as hemp because of the stigma attached to it, but they didn't completely eliminate it, but certainly the cotton farmers wanted to stop hemp from being grown and sold as a fiber. Now, the other thing, though, is they really had a hate-on for black people. Unfortunately, for whatever stupid reasons, after they had been able to be free citizens in some sense, though they couldn't even vote yet and had a lot of other problems. The cotton farmers had allowed black people to smoke and use cannabis on the plantations when they were being kept as slaves. They actually grew hemp as well. They knew what hemp was good for. They knew that it was better rope than anything else, and that it had a number of good uses, but they didn't like the fact that black people were smoking cannabis and otherwise living free. You know, jazz musicians in particular seemed to have the wrath of these individuals, and so it was something that was continued on past slavery. And so the idea that they could go after people of color and use this law to at the same time eliminate a major competition really appealed to the cotton farmers. But it went farther than that. As I mentioned, cotton uses a lot of pesticides, herbicides. DuPont Chemicals was working hand in hand with paper companies and cotton farmers. In fact, the banker for DuPont Chemicals was also the banker for General Motors. It was also, what was that bank? Damn, I should have looked more of this up lately, but Andrew Mellon was the richest man in America in the early 1900s. He became the Secretary Treasurer of the United States, because they're all about money, right? The more money we make, the better, so who better to put in charge of the Treasury than the richest guy in the country? Well, Andrew Mellon had investments in, again, General Motors, DuPont Chemicals, Gulf Oil, that little oil company. This individual was heavily invested in a lot of chemical companies and other, industries. Now, the one that really put it over the edge, though, was the fact that hemp seed oil can be used in diesel engines. In fact, the original diesel engines were made to use vegetable oil. They weren't made to use fuel, the petroleum like it is being used today. It was made to use vegetable oil. And in the early 1900s, there was this debate between using vegetable fuels or using fossil fuels. And in fact, one of the reasons alcohol was prohibited was to stop farmers from making their own fuel on their properties, because they were making ethanol and they were distilling vegetable matter in order to make fuel for their tractors and stuff, just like we're doing finally again now, being self-sufficient. And so alcohol prohibition stopped farmers from making ethanol-based fuels, but they started to make seed fuels. The seed or the oil in the cannabis seed is just incredibly good fuel. It was used in oil lamps historically, and to this day would be one of the most efficient biofuels that we could possibly use. And so the combination of Gulf Oil and DuPont Chemicals and Hearst Newspaper Company and the large paper companies and everyone else was really eventually overwhelming. And so by the time 1937 came around, there was a great fear of marijuana. There was very little hemp being used anymore, though, because over the years, these different industries and the American government stopped buying hemp, stopped having it be used in any of their products, with very few exceptions. Poultry farmers kept using it. One of the few groups that opposed the Marijuana Tax Act was the poultry farmers in the United States, and the American Medical Association was also totally opposed to the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937. They had very little warning that these laws were coming into effect, but essentially the tax that was being placed on marijuana was being placed on one of their most effective medicines, and they were not happy with that. But nevertheless, the laws passed with really no scientific base. They actually passed the similar laws here in 1923 because these rich conglomerates essentially had much greater control over the Canadian government at the time. It was really a small country and with very little opportunity for people to see and know what the government was doing. And so these laws were passed very quickly, whereas in the United States, democracy took a little bit more time. But certainly by 1937, these different industries were taken out, much to our detriment, I think, as a planet or as a people and the planet, to be sure. But it was something that really also surprised the hemp farmers. They hadn't been told that the Marijuana Tax Act was going to affect them. And so it wasn't even a prohibition. You know, these people are so good at writing their laws. It was a tax, I think it was $100 on an ounce that you were supposed to pay the government, which in today's day and age might not seem like a lot for Herb, but the idea of paying a tax like that on the hemp was absolutely outrageous. And so the hemp farmers and the hemp industry was completely surprised. In fact, in 1938, Popular Mechanics published an article, the front cover of which said something like, you know, hemp, new billion-dollar crop. And that term, that number had never actually been applied to any other crop before that. It was seen as being the most potentially useful plant on the planet that would provide our fuel, our food, it would provide our clothing. We can make plastics out of the oil, just like we make plastics out of the fossil fuels. I didn't bring any of that today, but you know, we could be making, you know, almost all of our building materials as well. I brought my hemp insulation from Nepal. I should have been hugging it much longer just so that you know it's totally safe and non-toxic. I got some hemp stain, because cannabis seed is also really good for stains and oils and paints and stuff like that as well. We used to be using it in all those sorts of things. I got some hemp plywood over there, which is actually made in China. I so wish it was being made here, but certainly it could be. It's just a matter of these industries being developed here. But you may have gotten the sense that, you know, one of the main reasons that the cannabis plant was not only made illegal, but why it hasn't been brought back, is in fact because it threatens so many multinational corporations. And we could be making our own building materials and products not only across this country, but in every country around the world. And we wouldn't have to rely on these multinational corporations shipping fuel from one country to another and making plastic and all these other processes which are unhealthy. But they're not going to invest in the hemp industry. It's been something that is far too obvious here in Canada. Hemp became legal again in 1998. We've been growing it here for, I guess, almost 15 years now. And there was an initial flurry to grow hemp in Canada, but unfortunately there was no processing places for it. And at one point, the DEA even shut down the border and stopped any hemp seed products from going across the border. And the rules for growing hemp are actually more restrictive than the rules for growing medical marijuana, which is really quite ironic. Health Canada has got a long form to sign out. You pretty much need a lawyer to grow hemp. The seeds are completely controlled by the government of Canada. They come and they test your crop to make sure that you're growing the exact genetics that they've sold to you. You're not allowed to have unradiated or basically good seeds to leave the property. They don't want anyone to be able to have a hemp seed in Canada that they can plant in the ground and grow. And so while initially, years ago, they were selling hemp seed, whole hemp seed that would go through radiation equipment, now what they do is they break the sort of the hull or the shell off, and they sell you the hemp heart, or the hemp nut, as it's often called, which doesn't have all the oil in it. They take the oil and sell it separately, and then they take the shell that they've broken off, grind it up, and sell it as hemp protein. And so while these things are all available, they're not something that you can produce easily on your own, because these seeds to grow hemp plants, as I said, are actually much more difficult to get a hold of than seeds for growing and producing cannabis marijuana, which is quite ironic and sad. But there's no, aside from food production in Canada, where we do have hemp milk and a bunch of other products. In a few weeks, it's the hemp products class, so we'll bring a whole bunch of stuff then. I think I just brought my BC Bud barbecue sauce. Certainly, while small-scale producers in Canada have been making a bunch of products, soaps and stuff like that, we don't have any large-scale fiber, hemp fiber production facilities. We don't have any place to make insulation, which is just ridiculous. It would be so simple to make machinery to do this. We don't have anywhere making concrete using the cannabis plant, but we actually started making hempcrete this summer. You can check it out on our YouTube video. I've made a couple of different tests of brick. The first one, I got some stock from the growers of the Buyers Club and put it in a wood chipper, and just the first experiment was lime, water, and stock, and the second experiment we used sand at the lime and the water. And it's really kind of neat to see how it's working together and fossilizing, just like the cob buildings that people would make traditionally and currently using straw and straw bale construction. And so, yeah, it's something that the hemp plant has a great potential, and it's not being used as it should be in this country. And that's because of these large corporations that, again, in the 1920s and 30s, took it out in order to gain full control over all these other industries that have nothing to do with smoking cannabis. Really, the pharmaceutical companies were barely getting up and running at the time, and it really has more to do with petrochemicals and other other companies. But it's just about time to wrap up here and get ready for the 420. So I'm just going to finish off by thanking everybody for coming. Next week we have, as a special guest, David Bratzer, a Victoria police officer who's running for the Victoria School Board, is going to be here. It's a class on politics, but really I hope to let him speak most of the time. And really happy to work with the police officer here in Victoria. He's a member of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. He's spoke at Hempology events and such before. He's an awesome guy. So he'll be here at 3:30 next week. I hope you're all able to get the word out for us. And other than that, I think Hemp Products is actually the week after that. So yeah, if you want to find out more about hemp, it's one of my favorite things to talk about. But I got to get us ready here for 420. So thanks everybody for coming out. Again, there's problems with the room, so if the weather's good, we'll be out here next week, and hopefully we'll have a room number for you. Otherwise, we'll be in the sub-building by room 110, and we'll tell you where we are if the weather's not good. But I'd really love to have Dave Bratzer out here, so I'm going to make a deal with Mother Nature again, and we'll see you back here next week. So thanks everybody for coming out. Have a great day, and smoke them if you got them.